So AWS, right? So in
Yeah.
my, I have an analyst business. I advise companies. Starting about 2005, I was telling the HPs and the IBMs, guys, where is the productivity? Where's the CMM level 5 in your data center outsourcing?
Hmm.
And they would laugh at me. It's like, data centers are big assets. We don't need to be that,
Right.
we don't need to deliver that kind of efficiency. I mean, it was like they were fat and unhappy.
Yeah.
So AWS comes around and cleans them out too.
Yeah.
So, when I step back and I go, it's easy to call Amazon names, but they've delivered brand new paradigms and efficiency.
So look, I want to be clear here. I think Amazon is a brilliant company. I think they're remarkable. They're transformative. They've done absolutely extraordinary things. However, I think that they are obsessive in their focus. I think they have very little concept of collateral damage and they don't much care about it. They're focused on their knitting, on what they're doing. And I've talked to many sellers, I've talked to many partners of Amazon and competitors. I mean, competitors I don't pay too much attention to, but they have, and it's partly a problem in an area that you're very familiar with. They are now running an empire. They have 16 million SKUs or 20 million SKUs of their own, plus 300 million SKUs of the marketplace. The only way to manage this is with automation,
Sure.
right? It's not possible. The problem is that this is a complex system and automation inevitably has rough edges, right? And they have done a poor job of managing the rough edges. They have not put enough resources into it. I mean, by their own account, they have not. They boast about how much resources they put in, but when you contextualize it into the size of their business, it's chicken feed. And partly, I think, it's because they're losing money, right? So there is pressure to stem the bleeding, and that means they try and cut corners in certain areas. And one of the areas is smoothing off the rough edges of their automation. And they do a very poor job of it.
How does the consumer either see it or get hurt by the rough edges? I'm
So,
not sure many consumers would know what you're talking about.
okay, so I think there's been a fairly distinct deterioration in the customer experience on Amazon in two ways, in two clear ways, and well, actually more than two. So here's a few. First, search results now are overwhelmingly dominated by advertising. I mean, it's basically a broadsheet, not a search result. And they've gone overboard there because they're searching for margin and searching for revenue.
Sure.
So that's item one. Second, the estimates I've seen suggest that 40% of sellers are based in China, and their reliability is less. And we have a lot of bad actors working on the platform. I know Amazon is doing stuff about it. The people I talk to find that it is insufficient, and customers are starting to notice. Amazon makes decisions that I think devalue the customer, that devalue the customer experience. So here's another one that they did quite recently. So recently, they decided to allow star reviews with no text. All right, so you can just put in 5 stars.
Sure.
And this is a walking open invitation to bad actors to buy reviews. I mean, if you don't have to write English, it's a lot easier to do a bad review, isn't it? Or a good review. So, and the market for this, there is an open market for reviews on Amazon. You can just buy them. Star reviews are cheap. The number of reviews has gone up and up. Amazon knows that customers are used to looking at the number of reviews as a proxy for quality. So effectively, Amazon has diluted its quality metric for customers in pursuit of a buck. And I think that is is a sign. I don't think Amazon runs on trust, right? Runs on the trust of customers and the trust of sellers. And it's walking closer and closer to a pretty fine line.
So in our household, we buy branded goods from Amazon.
Right.
So the first problem you're talking about, I'm not sure affects us that much. And I'm not saying I'm the poor typical consumer. I buy a lot of stuff from Costco. My wife buys a lot of stuff from Whole Foods, which is also Amazon. But we still buy a lot of stuff from specialty retailers, right? So
Yeah, I've given up completely. I don't do it anymore.
So, I mean, I hear the points you're making. I'm not sure the average consumer, maybe they are. I haven't heard as much of that. The funny thing is I'm doing a research project on field service, customer service, right? And I've been interviewing people about positive and negative experiences. It's a small sample so far, but so far 40% of them have mentioned Amazon as a paragon of service. So these are executives.
Yeah.
So
when you say field, what kind of people are you interviewing?
Oh, these are corporate executives. So they have industrial products, they have field service.
Fascinating. I just wrote, I mean, it's very interesting because I wrote a piece recently, I'll send you a link, about an alternative platform to Amazon that focuses on construction parts for construction equipment. And their claim is that Amazon simply doesn't know enough, and that their customers are more, I guess, more demanding than Amazon's sort of down the middle solution will allow. So it's interesting that you're working in a kind of a similar.
They were talking about their personal experiences.
Yeah.
For their specialty markets, you're absolutely right. There are different networks, business networks, around vertical products and so on.
That's right. I mean, Amazon comes in and it scoops up like the center of the market, the most commodified parts, right? The most standard parts where there's the highest volume, and that works for the Amazon model. But anything more specialized than that is, and I see signs of Amazon entering a sort of period of hubris. I mean, it'll be interesting to see if they emerge on the other side of it. The two signs I see most clearly are their entry into groceries, which I think is ridiculous, and their entry into high fashion, which is even more so. So they've made quite a big deal out of both of them. The groceries thing is a big deal. They're putting a lot of push behind it, a lot of money, and it strikes me as completely nuts. In fact, Bezos has a statement in one of his shareholder letters, which explains exactly why he won't be getting into physical stores. And so yet here they are in physical stores in the most difficult market segment. I don't see any, explain where they have a competitive advantage here.
I don't know if it's a competitive advantage or if you look at groceries, they tend to be very, very regional, right? You get Albertsons and Publix, and many of them are still family owned. That is a market that has not been challenged in decades.
Oh, I don't think that's really true. I mean, look at the low profit margins. The margins are tiny.
I mean, our local regional player is Publix. They're not low margin at all. So
Kroger's and Albertsons and the big boys look for a margin of 1% to 2%. And this is clearly a high capital business, right? It's very demanding to build it out. It's difficult because building a physical building takes time and money and energy, and you need thousands of them to be at a scale which is competitive. Aldi's has 1,500. They're the fourth biggest, and there are all these very established players with deep supply chains in a difficult business. I see no way that Amazon is going to make money on this.
Well, let's swing back to automation in
Sure.
general. So what else are you seeing in trends in automation? I wrote a book 5 years ago.
Yeah.
Where I looked at about 50 industries, and I looked at everything from robotics to drones to autonomous vehicles to machine learning, remote robotic process automation, AI, and so on. And back then, Oxford, you talk about Oxford. Oxford had a hugely scary projection that
Yeah,
40,
I know all about that.
percentage.
That was bogus. There was a lot of nonsense in that.
Well, but it was getting a lot of play.
It did get a lot of play.
My former employee Gartner had something similar in the IT world.
Yes, they did. Yeah.
So when I was writing a book, I interviewed executives in 50 different industries. And most of them told me basically, look, Benny, it's promising, too expensive, not reliable enough, rough edges, like you say, different version of calling it rough edges, right?
Yeah.
And they were like, it'll gradually take over certain tasks, not complete jobs, certain tasks. So I was writing this against a backdrop of all those scary projections. So I had to go and say, I can't just come out and say, you guys are full of crap, right? Basically, I presented what I had learned, what they were talking about. And I said, as an arbitration, I will go study what automation has done over the last century. So I looked at the UPC code, which was first patented in the late 40s, and the gradual adoption in the grocery business. I looked at ATM machines and the gradual adoption in banking. I looked at automatic gears, right? And 60 years later, 50% of cars sold even today are stick shift, right? So over and over again, I saw automation and I saw very gradual adoption. So I went and looked at what happens. What does society do to slow down adoption? Why does society not adopt it the way us technologists predict it will, right? So it was kind of fascinating. I came out of on the side of there are what I call speed bumps. Society has speed bumps against too much automation. So till last year, I came out looking pretty good. And then suddenly during the pandemic, I saw an acceleration everywhere. Now, I think what happened there was the labor became very fickle, very unreliable, partly because of work from home, right? But also the stimulus, certainly in the US, reduced incentive for a number of workers to go back to work. I mean, I would hear horrendous stories about workers would show up in the morning, never to come back in the afternoon, and not come back ever again. I mean, just stories of just very unreliable labor.
Well,
second,
you can
let me just finish.
Okay.
Another point was a number of companies said we're too dependent on supply chains that are too long, too far away. You got to bring some manufacturing back. We can't do it at our wages. We got to have more automation. So there are 2 or 3 drivers for automation I saw last year, which now has made me revisit my slow adoption thinking. So tell me what you're seeing.
So I have a different theory of the of what happens with adoption. I did some work on productivity data a little while ago, and I think what has happened now, this is a hypothesis, so you can tell me if you think it's right. So gradually, software is eating the world anyway. It's eaten the world of white collar jobs, and that's what I was looking at. So everybody works with software now, and the software improves gradually, right? Typically, it isn't a paradigm shift. It's just, every year the software is a little bit more productive. It helps you be a little more productive. But people don't get fired for that, right? It's not like you have 10 people and your software it makes everybody 10% more productive. You don't fire anyone. Everyone just takes it a little easier. So what happens is you get to the point of a major break, and the major breaks, the previous one was the Great Recession. And then this one was the pandemic. And what happens is that managers feel huge pressure and they let a lot of people go. And those jobs, essentially what happened was that workers were acquiring the leisure created by the productivity created by new tools and digital software, and using it for their own purposes, you know, watching Netflix or shopping or whatever. And then suddenly it was all reacquired by the employer after the crash. People were let go, they're not brought back. I mean, not, you know, some come back obviously, but there's a huge resorting of work. So do I think that people are work shy? If people don't have to work, I imagine they don't work. I mean, but I also don't think that the pandemic assistance was enough for most of them. I mean, a few, yeah, but most people have more obligations and more ambition. And I'm reminded of a conversation I had with Honda a while ago when I was doing some work on the manufacturing extension partnership, and we were in Ohio and doing a meeting with the auto manufacturers, and Honda was there, and the Honda guy said in the meeting, look, you know, you guys have to do a better job training workers to work with automated machine tools. That's what we use now. We need people who can do that. And everyone sort of nodded and said, well, yeah, we have to do a better job of that. Let's talk to the community colleges and whatnot and see what we can do. And after the meeting, I talked to the Honda guy and I said, well, you know, how many jobs do you have? How many people do you need? 10. That was it, 10. And he wanted somebody else to do the training. And I guess my point is that, you know, if managers are saying, well, you know, we can't afford to pay these people, well, maybe you need to make your products better and be able to afford it. I mean, this notion that you just because, I mean, it's sort of the minimum wage argument, really. If you can only make your business work when you're paying $7 an hour, then maybe as society as a whole would do better if you went out of business and people found jobs at $10 an hour somewhere else. I mean, I'm not, you know, the inverse of the minimum wage argument is, well, obviously we should allow wages to go to $1 an hour. That way we would have all the jobs we need, right? There would be, everybody would have a job if you know, there would be immense demand for labor if the minimum wage was $1, but we don't do that, right? For social reasons. We believe that the high road, the job, that it's better to have jobs that pay better. And just so I know that that's going to drive automation. I agree with you. It's, of course it is going to do that, but automation is coming anyway. I mean, look, Amazon, whether Amazon pays $15 an hour or $16 an hour or $17 an hour, they are automating. They've already automated all of the purchasers out of their inventory chain, their supply chain, right? They've had a 5-year project to automate purchasing for their own business, so they don't have to have buyers anymore. It's called.
Well, I have a slightly different view on that. Yeah, I don't look at the world as socialism, capitalism, worker versus employer. Well, I do to some extent, but I see pockets of you know, industries where incumbents just get to a certain state and are very hesitant to change, right? So go back to my outsourcing example. The Western firms, the Accentures, the IBMs, the Deloittes, and so on, got a bit of a shock when the Indian firms started to become competitive, right? But they've regained footage and they continued on their merry way.
Yeah.
I've been telling them for 20 years, you're too people dependent. It's not just expensive, it's unreliable. The quality that you can deliver with so many people, it's just very difficult. I mean, the amount of money they spend on recruiting and training is their biggest single expense, right? And you could spend that much in automation and make things so much better. They still laugh at me. I mean, they just don't want to change, right?
No.
So somebody will come along with automation and upend that model.
Well,
Sometimes it is sometimes it is the incumbents that attract a level of automation, not the labor part. It's just that incumbent businesses are very inefficient. Amazon came along and showed that book publishing was inefficient. It's shown retail was inefficient. I think it's starting to show that even the UPSs and FedExes may have been a little inefficient.
Well, they're inefficient for certain purposes. And this is to some degree a problem. So you can imagine that Amazon becomes very efficient at delivering parcels. I mean, it's already very efficient. So let's say that it develops a business around this. It might. Amazon shipping has been tried in LA and London, and probably it'll come back after the pandemic. Okay, so let's say they're successful and they take a big bite out of the post office, who after all delivers most of their packages right now and is completely dependent on it. So this is what I kind of meant by collateral damage. So that's fine. We get parcels delivered more cheaply, but the net result is that first-class mail collapses because the post office has to go out of business.
Well, that's a little more complex, right? I mean, Congress has already burdened the U.S. Postal Service with all kinds
if they take that out, still, the reality is that the post office generates $7 billion in revenue from Amazon. And if Amazon took that away, the post office, because of the collapse of first-class mail, people don't send mail anymore, right? They don't send letters. They send some, but not enough to support the infrastructure of the post office. So we would be transforming what has been a sort of central institution of our country. Universal mail service has been, well, it's been around since the beginning. And we're doing this, but we're allowing Amazon, essentially allowing Amazon to do this in a completely unquestioned way to sort of cannibalize part of the business. And it will do the same in other places too. I mean, you know, Amazon is into healthcare. There's no doubt that Amazon is moving into healthcare. Is it a bad thing? No, I can't wait. I mean, like, you know, as a consumer, I can't wait. But I'm concerned that what will happen is that Amazon will cherry pick the pieces of the business that suit it, and that the rest will be left in tatters.
So let's take the book publishing example.
Yeah.
Is the world a poorer place with the
No.
traditional book publishers starting to hurt? You said
well, so let's talk about what's happened. So the net result of all this is that almost all new books are not profitable for publishers. That's why they keep going around buying each other so they can buy their back list, which is profitable. So we're getting fewer new books, and they are much more market oriented. So the band of the available band for authors, even though there are many more authors, because you and I are now self-published authors, right? The model of being an author has changed dramatically, right? We have to do our own marketing. We have to do our own everything. Fine. I'm not sure that that's a terrible thing. I'm not sure that it's a great thing. It's a different thing. And it happened because Amazon, you know, trod on the business and blew it up. I mean, and to some degree, it's a good thing. Absolutely. I'm not really here to defend ancient retail dinosaurs that can't function in the modern world. That's not what I'm for. But, you know, our retail, is it a good thing that our malls are collapsing, right? And that and it's an open question. It's not a fixed question.
You know, Robin, institutions don't last more than 20, 30 years anymore. So malls will be repurposed into something else. I tend to not be as nostalgic about things.
I hate malls. I'm not even defending them. I hate them. I think they're horrible excrescents, but they are like a central geographical fact in a lot of communities, So if Amazon extracts the value from there, I think there's a lot of collateral damage that we don't really think about. And this comes back all the way to the beginning of our conversation, where I was saying, you know, we have trouble with the pace of change now. You know, the mal collapses. It's not like the next purpose shows up tomorrow, right? The mal in my part of Washington, D.C., near Washington, D.C., collapsed. And it's been empty for 10 years. And this is in the most, I think, the most affluent county in the country. And it's still empty for 10 years. So change comes, yeah, but it doesn't come that quickly. And, you know, for people, the same thing is true. Your putative child that we were talking about earlier has invested in a certain track. Our systems are not geared to allow for retracking, are they?
They're not, but you know, the way I look at it is the Fortune 500 used to last, I don't know, 60, 70
100
years.
years maybe, yeah.
Yeah, now it only lasts 20 years, right? I mean, our institutions aren't lasting that long. The rate of change in every aspect of life has become quicker. So, you know, we can rule that, hey, society is moving too quick, but you're not going to be able to stop it.
Well, I agree you won't be able to stop it, but you do have to think pretty hard about how to ameliorate the consequences.
You expect this Congress to think about it?
Yeah, I do. I think they'll think about it. Will they manage to do much? Not especially, no. We're not really. They got too many other crises to deal with. So.
I mean, I have way more faith in our private sector than I do in our politicians. So I'm not looking for
yes and no, yes and no. I mean, you can rely on the private sector, but you can rely on the private sector to do what is best for the management of the private sector.
And if you let them beat each other up, compete, which is why I don't have a problem with Amazon killing some of the other inefficient players. Somebody will come along and challenge Amazon. You know, the problems you're pointing to will hurt Amazon. Somebody else will exploit it.
Maybe, yeah, maybe if Amazon screws up badly enough, but it's in their hands. They do have the opportunity to cement dominance in the US in a way that I think will upend your 20 to 30 year timeline. I don't think it's possible to compete because they own the customers and they own the distribution, and those are the two things that you need in a retail business. And location no longer matters.
Well, Robin, this is fascinating.
Yeah.
Thank you so much.
It's been a good conversation.